All right, we're back. Graveyard Shift Movie Podcast, episode number 147. This week, we're taking a look at The Ring from 2002, the American remake of the Japanese version Ringu from 1998. I was curious. I pulled out the big fucking book of our past movies and the scores and stuff we gave. Ringu, I gave it a 5.5, and Tyler gave it a 5. So we were very much down the middle for this movie. The American remake is pretty similar to the original movie. There is there's some weird shit they changed in there. Mostly relating to horses. There's a crazy scene with a horse on a boat midway through the movie that came out of nowhere. And the ending is somewhat different. Instead of where the Ringu ended, that same thing happens in this movie, but it then goes beyond that to explain stuff further. And when that happened, I was like, they're fucking going even longer than what they are, because this movie is 2 hours long. It's a long boy. But I will say, I think I like the ending in this one better than the original. And so I think that's why I'm going to give this one a 6. So I say I like it a half point better than the Japanese original version. Mainly because I think the ending was better. Because, I mean, you get it in Ringu, but they add an extra little element on the end of this one that I feel like went better to explaining, like, what the deal is with this whole Samara and how to break the curse and all the shit. So, yeah, I think I like the ending better on this one. So I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 for The Ring. But all around, yeah, it was pretty much the same as the other one. Neither one of these movies really blew me away, which is because I've seen people really like this movie and the Japanese one. But yeah, neither one of them really, fucking made me jump out of my seat with it. Neither one of them are very scary either. They're really not. I mean, they're horror movies, don't get me wrong, but they're not like a fucking. I don't know, I can't even really say it's tense, because it never really gets tense in the movie either. It's just sort of, it's more of a mystery. Both of them are like a mystery with horror elements. And every now and then they'll throw in something at you but for a good probably hour straight in this movie, it's just like looking up documents and interviewing people, and yeah, and it's not like, there is no like building tension as it goes along. But it is what it is. So anyway, also while I'm here, I'm gonna try to see if this kid did anything. This kid fucking who plays the son in this movie, he freaks me out because he looks like he's like 45 and a 10-year-old. Funny enough, he played Jedediah Hewitt in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which, if you remember the remake, there's that little kid that they like find in the barn, and he like tries to help them out. He like bites Leatherface's hand at one point or whatever. So that's cool. Apparently he became an attorney also. So shout out to that kid. But anyway, hey, spoiler warning for The Ring. I'm going to ruin everything about it. So if you've never seen it, you have been warned. The movie starts off with two schoolgirls watching TV. They're both bored as fuck. So they turn off the TV, and the one girl is like, hey, did you hear about this fucking videotape that you watch it, and then 7 days later, you fucking die? And the girl's like, what? Who fucking told you that? And the girl's like, oh, it's just a story, you know, why you freaking out? And she's like, cuz bitch, I watched that fucking tape. I seen it. And then I got a phone call telling me that I would die 7 days later. And the other girl's like, now you're messing with me, you know? And the girl's like, I'm not messing with you. I watched it a week ago. And then she's like, and starts choking and shit. And she falls over like into the other girl's lap. And the other girl's like freaking out. And then she's like, I'm pulling your dick, you know? And she was just fucking around. And so they're laughing, having a good time, joshing with each other. But then the phone starts ringing. And they're like, oh, shit, you know? So they creep down the stairs. They slowly answer the phone. But it just ends up being the one girl's mom. And so they're like, oh, okay. They're, you know, we're freaking out for nothing. The friend goes upstairs. The girl who's on the phone with her mom is getting like a glass of lemonade, and she's hanging up with the mom, and she's about to go upstairs where the friend is, but the TV in the living room suddenly kicks on, and it's just all static. So she walks in, and she sees it, and she's like, hey, fucking stop, and she turns it off. But as she's leaving, TV turns on again, all static and shit. So this time she goes over and she pulls the plug out of the TV, so it fucking turns off completely. And as she does that, there's like this fucking liquid, invisible object that like zooms across, and she's like, what the fuck, you know? And it goes into the kitchen, and she goes into the kitchen and looks around, but she can't find anything. So then she runs upstairs to go and find the friend. But as she does, she sees there's a bunch of water coming out from underneath her bedroom door. So she slowly walks up to her door, feet all in the water and shit. And she opens up the door and swings it open, and it zooms in on the TV that's sitting there showing like a well in a field. And then it crash zooms in on her face, and we see it start to get all ghostly and shit. And then we cut away. And we cut over to Naomi Watts playing the main character, Rachel, who is on her way to pick up her son from school. As she picks him up, the teacher is like, hey, can I fucking talk to you for a little bit, you know? And Naomi Watts is like, all right, sure, whatever. And so the teacher shows Rachel these drawings that her son are made. That's all this creepy shit and fucked up shit. And Rachel's like, listen, his cousin died, right? The cousin? Let me make sure. I swear it's a cousin, but it seems like they were more brother and sister. Because I think that, you know, Naomi Watts is the sister of the mom, who was the mom of Katie, who died. So I think that it's his cousin, but they were really close, you know? So she's like, listen, he's just, you know, trying to deal with this shit. You know, his cousin just died 3 days ago. He's just trying to work through it. And she goes to leave, and then the teacher is like, yeah, but he drew these over a week ago. And the mom's like, fuck, you know, you didn't say all that. So that afternoon, they go to the funeral for Katie. And as they're there, Naomi Watts goes over and talks to her sister, Katie's mom, who tells her that 3 different people who did autopsies on her daughter couldn't tell her how her daughter died. And she's like, I saw her face. And it crash cuts to the mom opening up the closet, and we see the girl all fucked up, like her face, mouth wide open and shit in the closet, dead. Recreates that cool ass shot from the original movie. The original movie did the same exact thing. And she's like, something fucking happened. She's like, you know, she's like, I know you have connections I don't have. Can you figure out what the fuck happened to my daughter? Rachel goes outside for like a cigarette. And as she's out there, there's a couple of Katie's friends who are out here talking. And they mention how The friend who was with Katie the night she died is now in a psychiatric hospital. Naomi Watts is like, what, do you have any information that could help me out about what happened to Katie? And then this dude cuts in who's sitting there, and he's like, yeah, they watched that fucking videotape, her and Josh and, 2 other people. And they're like, well, so what? Josh is still around. And he's like, nah, Josh died the same day Katie died. And they're like, what the fuck did you just say? And before the mom can go further into it, she sees, like, her son going upstairs towards Katie's bedroom. So she goes inside to follow him. And she goes in Katie's room. And as the son and her are standing there, she's looking through this envelope with a bunch of photographs, but they're all fucked up, like someone drew over their faces and shit. But she does manage to see, like, the card where they got the photos developed. So, the next day, she goes to that photo place and gets the photos developed, and she's looking through them, and it's, like, Katie and her group of friends, and they're all going to, like, this cabin and shit. And finally, in the very last photo, we see all 4 of them standing there, and their faces are distorted and fucked up in the photo. And the mom's like, what the fuck happened here, So she goes back to work, and she does more research on these kids, and she finds all 4 of the kids that were in the photo. She looks around, and all 4 of them died the same day at 10 p.m. on the dick, exactly at the same time. So, through the picture, punch my mic, sorry people, didn't mean to hit you just then. Through the picture, she manages to find the name of the resort that the kids went to stay at, And so she goes up there, and as she gets the key for the cabin that they stayed at, she notices in the back, like, a bunch of videotapes, and one of them is missing. And she's like, why is that one tape missing? And the guy's like, kids take it and they just never return it. It is what it is. So when she goes into the cabin that they stayed at, she ends up finding the tape. And she's like, oh, fuck, look at this shit, And then, of course, she's just like, let me play it. Which is the dumbest shit. Like, at this point, she's seen that everyone who supposedly watched this killer tape died the same day at the same time. Like, that's an awful big coincidence. And in different locations. It wasn't like they were in a fucking car all sucking each other's dicks and, like, head-on collision and they fucking got killed. It was, like, separate incidences that killed them all. One difference I noticed here is the same thing happened in the original where all the friends died, but we saw them, like, getting extracted out of that car, and it was a cool shot where their faces are all fucked up and shit. You never see any of that type of shit happen. We just hear that they died on the same day. So she puts in the tape and she watches it, and the tape is, it's like the original. There's some shit changed, but there's a bunch of creepy shit in here. And some stuff not creepy, just necessarily weird. It's a video of this lady brushing her hair, and then another mirror of, like, this girl backing up. There's a fucking burning tree. There's a lady jumping off of a cliff. There's a horse that's drowned on a beach. There's a giant ladder falling to the ground. There's a bunch of maggots. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of weird shit. And finally it ends with a shot of a well in a field. And then it goes static. And we see the lady's pupils fucking shrink down to, like, the size of a fucking pinhole. And then the phone rings, and she answers it, and we hear a small voice tell her she has 7 days. And so now the curse has started to affect her. She goes back home the next day, and she calls over... God, what is his fucking name in the movie? Let me scroll down to the bottom, because I know I put his fucking name here. Hold on. Give me a second. Noah. That's his name. She calls over Noah, who you know, she just happens to know. You like that one? That was a good one. Um, she calls over this dude Noah, who he works with videotapes and you know, photo and all this editing software and shit. And she tells him about the videotape that killed all these people, and then shows him the photos of the people with the fucked up faces. And then she's like, take a picture of me. And he takes the picture, and we see that her face is all fucked up. And then we see a bunch of like self photos she's taken of herself, and every one, her face is all messed up. And she's like, it has something to do with that tape. So he's like, well, let me see it. And so she does, which is kind of fucking selfish, but you know, whatever. So he watches the tape. He comes outside onto the balcony when it's done, and he's like, yeah, it was real amateur, you know. He's like, it must have been an amateur video. But then the phone calls, or the phone rings, but they don't answer it. And she sees it leaves a voicemail, but she just fucking deletes it. So she doesn't even, she's like, I'm not fucking answering it, you know. So she goes to work the next day, and she makes a copy of the videotape that she can give to Noah, because he wants to break it down more, and so he needs his own tape. As she does that, she goes into, she makes the tape or the copy, and then she goes to Noah's office and she gives it to him, and they're like slowing it down and stretching it out to like blow up images and shit. And as they do that, Noah's assistant comes in, who is played by that like goth chick who's in like the NCIS shows or whatever. I don't know her name in the NCIS shows, but if you know the goth chick from the NCIS shows, that's her. And she shows up, and excuse me. And the dude's like, "Oh, this is my assistant or whatever." And so Naomi Watts immediately wants to get the fuck out of there after she shows up. And the dude's like, "Well, she's really good at slowing shit down and stuff. You know, why don't we have her help?" And she's like, "No." And she takes the tape or whatever. And the dude's like, "Why won't you let her help?" And she's like, "I didn't want her to watch the tape, you know." And he's like, "Oh, but you were okay with me watching it." And so he's like, "I just think you're jealous, you know." And once again, the goth chick from NCIS playing the assistant. The assistant character is very much a nothing character in both the original and this movie, and it's just here to show like a little bit of jealousness, you know, because it's clear that like something went on between these two, but you don't know what it is. And this is just to show that the mom is still like jealous, you know. So she leaves. She's walking home, and as she's walking home, she comes across this big ladder that's on the side of this building, and she's staring at it, and she's about to fucking climb it, and then this painter is like, "Hey, what the fuck, lady? Get the fuck out of here!" And he comes over, and he's like, it's a fucking painter, and he's like painting the side of the building. He might have also been much nicer about, you know, how he went about getting her away from the ladder, but I like it better in my version. So, the next day, Rachel goes to visit Becca in the psychiatric hospital. This is the lady who was with Katie the night she died. And she's looking real fucking bad. She's pale as a ghost. Probably hasn't showered in weeks. Looks dry as fuck. Yeah, seen better days, this lady. So she's begging the girl. She's like, "Tell me how Katie died." She's like, "Did Katie tell you about the videotape and shit?" And she's like, "Please, I need some answers, you know, how did she die?" And Becca grabs Rachel's hand, and she's like, "You'll find out how she died in 4 days." And I was like, "Ooh, bitch, what the fuck did you just say?" And Rachel's like, "All right, that cool. I'm gonna head out, head out now." Yeah. Once again, Ringu, I know that they said the friend went to the psychiatric hospital. I don't remember if we ever visited her. Part of me thinks that we did, but the other part seems to think that they just never mentioned it again. But if that's the case, I'm glad this movie like actually went and showed you in the psychiatric hospital. If I went back and watched that Ringu episode, I bet you me and Tyler were like, how come they never went to the fucking psychiatric hospital where that lady was supposed to be? So Rachel goes back to her office, and once again, she's like slowing down the tape and going through it, trying to find shit. And there's this fly that keeps walking around on the screen. And she pauses it, and as it's paused, she notices that the fly's wing still is moving. And she's like, what the fuck, So she reaches in and pulls the fly out of the TV, and then her nose starts bleeding. And she's like, oh, fuck, shit's getting serious. And then we cut to Sunday, which is day 4 out of 7 since she's watched the tape. So we're breezing through these fucking days that this lady has. She goes to the library and she gets a book about lighthouses. And I was very excited. I was hoping Willem Dafoe was in one of the photos. By the way, I will add in, I'm not really sure why she was looking up lighthouses. I'm sure there was something she found earlier in the tape that caused her to go look up this shit. But, either way, she goes and she's looking up lighthouses. And she ends up finding this fucking island called, like, Baduski Island or something. Where she sees all these people, like, standing there with glasses of champagne. And near the end of the line of people, it ends up being the woman that we see in the video brushing her hair. Also, she looks very weird in these photos. It looks like she's photoshopped in. She's wearing like this black dress and everyone else is wearing white. And so she looks down at the names and we end up seeing that her name is Anne Morgan. So now that she has this name and this island, she's able to go further in depth. So she goes and finds a fucking comically oversized book to search through. And we see a bunch of clips of stuff she finds about this lady. Apparently she was a horse breeder and she committed suicide by jumping off a cliff. Apparently she had hallucinations. And she was administered to a psychiatric hospital for a while and all this shit. And just a bunch of, it just gets, deeper and deeper with this lady. We cut over to Noah for a second, who is buying cigarettes at this store. And as he looks up at the security camera, and on the TV, he sees that his face is all fucked up. So now he knows that he's cursed like the lady. The next day, Rachel calls her sister, the mom of Katie, who died, and she's asking her to watch over her son for the next 2 days because she's got to go out of town for some business, which is just, she's going to go to the fucking island. But as she's on the phone, she starts fucking choking, and she's like, what the fuck? And she ends up pulling out this thing that's like this long black strand of hair, and at the very end is like those fucking sticky things that they put on your chest, like if you go to the hospital, like take your EKG or whatever. And she's like, what the fuck? And then she looks at the phone, and the phone is filling up with water. She's like, this is fucking creepy. So she goes upstairs to check on her son, but when she goes in the son's room, he's not there, but instead we see a girl sitting with her back facing away from Naomi Watts with this long black hair. And so the lady goes over to her and puts her hand on her shoulder, and then the girl grabs her fucking arm, and we get a bunch of flashes of Rachel sitting in the psychiatric hospital all fucking wired up and shit. And then she wakes up and she's in bed, and we see that she has the handprint on her arm from where the girl grabbed her. She wakes up and she goes looking for her son, and she finds him in the living room watching the fucking killer tape, and she's like, God damn it, you fucking little fuck. You just fucking killed yourself, So the phone starts ringing. She goes over and she like hangs it up. But it fucking calls back. So this time she answers and she's like, fucking stop calling here. But it ends up being Noah. And he's like, hey, what's going on, you know? And she's like, he watched the tape. And he's like, who? And she goes, your son. And that's the big reveal that, you know, Noah is Aiden's dad, which we knew from the first one. He was, you know, he was the dad in the first one. I don't remember how they revealed it, but I remember being, you know, just over time, you're like, oh yeah, this is the dad, you know. But yeah, so she's like, your son watched the tape, and he's gonna fucking die now. So Noah comes and picks her up, and she's like, I gotta go get on this ferry and go to this fucking island where this horse farm is, where Anne Morgan's husband stays. And I gotta, you know, interview him. So she gets on the ferry, and she's reading more shit about, you know, Anne Morgan and stuff. And this is the first mention of Anne Morgan that where we're going through it, and they mention something about a daughter, and she's like, what the fuck, a daughter, you know? But then she goes walking through where like everyone has their cars parked, and she sees a horse cart or a horse trailer in the back, and a horse is in there, and she's like, hey buddy, you know? But clearly the horse is scared as fuck of her. Like, he's freaking around, jumping around, but she keeps trying to fucking pet him instead of just leaving him alone. And so this horse breaks free and breaks out of his horse trailer and goes running through running through the ferry, jumping on cars, breaking windshields and shit. At this point, 7 people are chasing this horse to try to stop him. Eventually, he rounds back and charges at Naomi Watts, but she ducks down, and so he jumps over the side of the boat. And then we see him get sucked under the boat. And so everyone goes and runs to the back of the ship, where the horse fucking goes into the propellers and gets chopped up and blood spurts out everywhere and shit. And I was like, you fucking dumbass lady just killed this fucking horse because you were like, hey buddy, you know, like, I was so pissed off at this lady. Yeah, so anyway, the fucking horse is dead. That scene definitely wasn't in the original, so that's a that's a Ring original right there for you. So she gets off the ferry. She finds this horse farm, and she goes up to the house and she's knocking on the door and no one's answering. But as she looks up in the window, she gets a flash, and we see that it's a window that was in the video. The tape where we see a guy like standing at the window looking out or whatever. So then she goes over to the horse barn, and here she's able to find the guy who runs the farm, and it's the husband of Anne and stuff, you know. And she's like, hey, I want to interview you about your wife. You know, and just about the horses and all this shit. And he's like, you reporters keep showing up. I don't know what more you want, you know. So he's like, sure, whatever, come interview me. And she's asking very basic questions until eventually she brings up the videotape. And he's like, what the fuck did you just say to me? And she's like, you know, the videotape. And he picks up a fucking hay hook. And I was like, oh shit, is he about to fucking off this bitch? And he's like, I'm sick of you reporters showing up, trying to dive into, you know, I don't want to talk to you about shit, you know. He's like, get the fuck out of my house. As she's getting kicked out, she brings up the daughter. She's like, what about your daughter? But he's like, what the fuck? He's like, shut up. And he kicks her out without, you know, diving further into what the lady said. We cut over to Noah, who is able to get access to these like medical files in this place, and he's looking through Anne Morgan's medical files, and we see shit about like a miscarriage, and you know, all these medical things she's had over the couple, or over her life. But then his nose starts bleeding, and he he's wiping his nose, and a different file falls out of Anne Morgan's file, and it zooms down, and we see Samara Morgan. Morgan is the name on the file. We cut back over to Rachel, who is able to find this old lady who I think runs a psychiatric ward hospital there, because she knows about Anne Morgan and stuff, and her son. I think it's her son, or it might just be a fucking dude or whatever. But he's a little slow in the head. He's clearly got some issues, and he's at this hospital as well. And so, Rachel's like, well, can you tell me about Anne and her daughter? And this lady ends up knowing like a shit ton about them, apparently, where she's saying how those two always wanted children, but they didn't think Anne could have it, and then they like went away on vacation, and when they came back, they had Samara, and everyone was real happy for them, but eventually the mom started telling everyone how she was having visions and these hallucinations, and it only happened when she was around Samara. And then she tells Rachel, listen, this place went through a lot of bad times, and ever since Samara's been gone, things have been fine. And so she's like, I don't want to dive. She's like, I'm happy that Samara's gone, basically. So Rachel goes back to Anne's house and basically just breaks in because she knocks on the door and no one answers, and then she just comes in. She walks in until she finds a TV. Or as she's walking in, by the way, she looks at the wall, and we get flashes, and we see that it's the wall that has the mirror where the girl's brushing the hair and shit. She walks into this closet area where she finds the EKG cords that we saw, and she finds birth documents about Samara. And with the birth documents, there's also a videotape that she plays. And it's a videotape of Samara in a psychiatric hospital, sitting there, and you see the clock, and the clock just spins. So she's sitting still for hours on end. And then they're interviewing her, and they ask her how she drew these photos that they have. And Samara tells them that she doesn't draw them, she just visualizes them, and they appear. And I believe this is the first time we ever hear this girl talk, because I don't think in Ringu you ever hear her talk. There might be a line or two, but this is full sentences. At one point we fully see her face, which I don't think we ever fully saw her face in Ringu. We saw brief glimpses, but she always had the hair down. So Samara then in the tape starts talking about how her parents are going to leave her here. And Samara, or the people interviewing her, no, your parents love you very much. And she's like, not daddy. Daddy doesn't want me. And daddy wants to get rid of me. Daddy only loves the horses and shit, and he wants to get rid of her. And as she's saying that, we cut to Rachel watching the tape, and standing behind her is the dad who has come inside from wherever the fuck he was. And I was like, oh shit. And the tape gets done, and Rachel stands up, and the dude has a horse bit, the fucking, and just swings it and smacks Rachel in the fucking face. He then picks up the TV that she was watching and carries it upstairs. And he's like, you fucking, you coming in here watching, get the fuck out of here. Rachel starts screaming at him, and she's like, you murdered your daughter. You hit her body. It's true. Tell me, And he's like, fuck you. And she follows him into the bathroom where he set up multiple TVs and has all these wires going everywhere. And he's filled up the bathtub, and he gets in and puts the horse bit in, and it's connected to the wires, and he turns on the electricity and fucking goes out like a G and just zaps himself in the bathtub. And Rachel is screaming, and then Noah just shows up. I guess he he just, happened to know where all this shit was, and, breaks into the house. We got a family full of housebreakers right here. So they go downstairs, and as they do, Rachel remembers something that the old lady said, or no, something that her son said. How her son said that the Samara was kept awake by the horses. And so they look out at the horse barn and they go inside. And inside they see the ladder from the videotape. And it leads up to like this fucking platform that's up there. So they climb up the ladder and they end up finding Samara's room, where apparently the dad just built her room up in the horse barn. And you can't even call it a room. It's a platform with a TV, a chair, and a bed. And that's where she stays because, the mom says that she causes all these, visions to happen to her. So, as they're up here, they see the wallpaper. There's like a crack in the wallpaper. And so they peel it back and we see the tree on fire that we saw in the videotape. And the lady recognizes it as a tree from the Shallow or the Mellow Mountain cabin or whatever. The cabin that the girl, Katie and her friends went to in the beginning of the movie that she had already been to earlier. So they leave that island, they go back to that mountain cabin, and they go inside and they're searching around for shit because at this point we're on day 7. Like, this lady has till 10 p.m. to figure out what the fuck's going on, or else she's dead. Eventually they find like a circle on the floorboards, and so the guy gets an axe and just starts busting through the fucking floor. Eventually he breaks through the floor, gets it out of the way, and we see the well that's been built, underneath this cabin. They push off the lid, and the well in this movie is a lot fucking deeper than it was in Ringu, where they can't see down it, and so they drop a rock, and you never hear the rock hit anything down there. As they're looking down this well, there's a TV in the cabin, and it starts flickering the static, and then water starts to come out from the TV, and nails in the floorboards start to unwind themselves. We get very Evil Dead-esque here, like the cabin starts coming alive. Eventually, they're still looking down for that rock that they threw down the well. Eventually, a bunch of fucking flies come up out of the well. And as that happens, Naomi Watts backs up into a beam that knocks out the ceiling. And it falls to make this TV that was on like a shelf slide perfectly, whack her in the face, and for her to fall head first down the well. It looks fucking crazy when she falls. So she falls into this deep as fuck well where they could not hear the rock hit the water. And she lands in water, but when she stands up, it's waist high. And I was like, there's no fucking way you would have lived falling head first down this, Also, when she's down there and Noah is calling down to her with the flashlight, it's very, it's not as tall as they were making it out to be. Also, one of the major differences in this movie, Noah in this movie compared to the dad in Ringu is a fucking worthless piece of shit, and he doesn't help anything. He never does anything good in this movie. The other guy, was fucking killing it. They were having to bucket the water out of the well, and he was fucking murdering it. He was helping with a lot of shit. Noah in this movie is fucking useless. So she falls down the water. She sees fingernails in the side of the well to be like, oh, Samara was trying to get out of the well, Noah leaves to go get some ropes to hand down there to climb up. And as he does, the the top of the well closes itself up again. And when it does, there's light that comes through and it makes a ring. There's a lot of different things the ring, I think, is because it makes a ring with the light that comes through the ceiling of the well. There's also, people have said, the phone rings, so the ring. The director of the movie has said it's about like the events where it keeps just going around and around, over and over again, so it makes a ring. But anyway, he goes and get outside to get a rope. But once again, Evil Dead, the rope comes alive and ties up around him, so he can't fucking move. And he's on the ground and just has to watch as like the sun goes down and shit. So we go back to Rachel in the well, and she sees a bunch of black hair, and she like is grabbing it, and then a hand comes up out of the water and grabs her and teleports her to the day that Samara died. And we see young Samara standing at the well, and her mom, Anne, comes up behind her, and she's like, "This is a good place, you'll like it here, And then she fucking throws a bag over her head and smothers Samara and throws her into the well. And so that's the big twist in this movie, is that the mom is really the one that killed Samara. Because originally it is the dad that kills her. And there's that great shot where it's like half a second where it's just him with a baseball bat and just like whack and just hits her in the back of the head and she falls over. But no, in this movie it's the mom who smothers the daughter to death, or smothers her and throws her over. In Ringu, I believe that the dad might have also killed the mom. I'm not 100% on that, but in this one, the mom kills herself, so, that's different shit as well. Yeah, so anyway, so Samara wakes up in the well, and she sees the mom, like, pushing the lid over top of her. And so then Rachel wakes back up, and she's like, she was alive, she didn't die, and then we see Samara's body coming up perfectly, normal looking kid, floating up to the surface, and Naomi Watts, like, holds it, and she's like, "You're okay, I got you now," And then Noah is calling down to her, he's gotten free, and he's like, "Hey, it's past 10 p.m., you're still alive, And she looks down, and it's really bad CGI of Samara's face, like, decaying to a skull. Which, I think in the original, I believe it was, she peels it back herself into a skull, and it looked really fucking gnarly. In this one, it's, like, all CGI, and it looks really fucking bad. So, yeah, it's past 10 o'clock. She's still alive, so, they're like, everything's cool. And we cut to cops have shown up to, take out the body and I'm sure make a police report about, the murder and all this shit. Rachel is sitting snuggled up to Noah, and she tells him the reason, it's 7 days after you watch the videotape is because Samara survived for 7 days in the well. And yeah, she's like, let's go home, So, she goes home. She gets her kid and stuff. They go home. Noah's like, all right, call me sometime, So he leaves, and she goes to bed with her son. They wake up in the morning, and the son is like, did you get that girl out of the dark place? And the mom's like, yeah, I got her out. Everything's okay. And Aiden is like, you weren't supposed to fucking help her. And she's like, everything's good. And he's like, no, you weren't supposed to do that. And she looks, and we see the hand mark still on his arm, and blood starts coming out of his nose. And he tells her that she never sleeps. And then we go over to Noah's office, who is sitting there like fucking around with something. And his TV turns on, and it's all staticky and shit. And he goes over and turns it off. But then it comes on again, and this time we see the well, and Rachel is trying to call him, but he's not answering. So finally she gets in her car and is fucking driving, speeding towards where he lives. And And Noah watches as Samara climbs out of the well and crawls towards the TV screen and then fucking crawls out of the TV towards him. And she stands up and looks at his face, and we zoom in on her eye that's all ghostly pale. And then it crash zooms to Noah's face, and it starts to go all dead and ghost-like, and we cut away, and we go to Rachel showing up at his apartment and coming inside and seeing him sitting in a chair with his back facing towards her. And there's broken glass where he broke like a tabletop as he was trying to get away from Samara, and bloody footsteps because he stepped in the glass. And so she walks over to him and spins his chair around, and she starts screaming because he's fucking dead. His face is all fucked up. We don't see it right here, but later we see a flash of it where he's all fucking dead. So she leaves. As she's leaving, she sees the goth NCIS girl getting in the elevator to go up to the office. And for some reason, she doesn't announce herself or tell the girl to stop. She just lets her go by. And so then she goes home and she's pissed off. And she's like, she's breaking the VHS tape and she's throwing the film in the fire. And she's like, what the fuck did I do that he didn't do? Why wasn't it me, And then she stops and she looks over at the copy of the VHS tape, and she remembers the old lady that she talked to saying how all Samara wanted was people to watch her and pay attention to her. And she realizes that the way to stop the curse is to make a copy of the tape and make someone else watch it. And so the final scene of the movie is we see her making her son make a copy of the tape that they're then going to show to someone to curse them, but it will save, them. And the son asks her, what about the people that we show the movie to? And then it goes static and we see the well, and it goes static again, and that's the end of the movie to presumably say, hey, got you fuckers. You just watched the tape, But yeah, all the Ringu, it was the same where the guy gets killed and then the lady goes and sees the copy of the tape. But I don't think we see her making, like, the son make the copy of the tape and stuff. And I think it just spells it out better exactly what it is. And this dark ending of, like, well, what about, showing, like, them having to resort to killing someone else to save, their own lives. Yeah, and so, I like the ending of this one, better than Ringu. Let's see, this movie had a budget of $48 million, and it made a box office of $249 million, until Stephen King's It, in 2017. This movie was the highest grossing horror remake in history. Which then it's fun because Stephen King just remade his own fucking his own shit. But yeah, so shout out to The Ring making that fucking money. And then I think there were sequels to this movie, I believe. I'm not sure. Let's see, The Ring. Yeah, The Ring 2, The Ring 2, and then in like 2005, and The Ring 3 didn't come out till 2017. And there's also The Grudge and stuff, which I think is related to The Ring. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. And what is it? The Japanese version? It's Joji or something is what it's called. But, yeah, anyway, I don't know if we'll ever watch the sequels, but maybe one day. And I still want to watch the, Joji or whatever, the Japanese one. But yeah, so that'll be coming up. But that's The Ring. Let's do best of, worst of. My best of? My best of, honestly, I think I might have put this as my best of in Ringu, but still, it's still cool, is when the mom says, like, I saw her face, and it's that first time that you see, like, the girl all fucked up. And this one, it's even, like, because she's got some blood coming out of her mouth and her head falls over and shit. And when they show the dead body, and I like the way that it's edited, how she just mentions it and it cuts right to it, and then we cut back and shit. I really liked it in the first one. I liked it just as much as this one. So that's my best of. Worst of, fucking Noah. His character was just, he's just there to be the dad. Like I said, in the first one, he was legitimately helpful. And in this one, he's just fucking useless. He does nothing. He's just the hot guy to be there as the love interest and to be the surprise death at the end. Yeah. And so, there's no, yeah. He did nothing for me. So, anyway, there you go. That is The Ring from 2002. Good movie. It's cool to see. I mean, once again, that and Ringu are very. I know they changed the name of the girl in Ringu. It's fuck, I can't remember I don't remember her name in the original. But they changed the name of the girl. They changed like what the dad and them do. There's not as much like telekinesis storylines going on. And obviously, the dad was the killer in that one. The mom's the killer in this one. There's a bunch of horse shit. not like legit, but like horses. That I wasn't expecting there to be a whole fucking horse storyline here. But yeah, it was cool. It's one of those movies I feel like you need to watch as a horror fan. It's the fucking Ring. It like has this whole, it's a super famous, spoofed everywhere, scary movie. So you definitely should watch it if you haven't, and you call yourself a horror fan. So I'm glad I finally watched it because I've never watched it. And now, I've seen the original and the remake. So that's pretty cool. Next week, we're diving into a classic when we watch the Amityville Horror from like 1979. I'm not exactly sure on the year right now, but I've been reading a book about the real life events that inspired horror movies, and Amityville was on there, and it just got me hooked on wanting to watch it. So we're watching the original, not the fucking Ryan Reynolds remake or whatever from like 2003, and not one of the 25 different spin-off sequels that they've made. That franchise still. There's a movie coming out, I think, this year of Amityville Killer Turkey or something. Like, it's crazy because I think it's public domain or something at this point. But we are watching the classic, the original one, so that will be next week. And then maybe an Evil Dead Rise episode will be coming soon. I don't know if it'll be an overtime or a graveyard shift. But me and Maverick and Bags went out and watched it in a theater. It had been a long time since I've been in a packed fucking theater. Watching everything I've seen. I work, my job, I work 4/10s, which is 4 10-hour days for any of you kids out there. So I get Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. So I can go on like Fridays at like 12:30 when no one's at the movie. So any movie I go see, I go at that time and it's always just me. And then when we went to see Terrifier 2, it was just, the whole thing. So every movie I've seen recently has been like me and maybe like one or two other people. But a lot of times it has just been me alone in the theater, which is great. I love it. But this one was like a packed theater and people were doing the classic, like, don't fucking go in there and shit. And so it was pretty cool. And it was a good time. Good hanging out with the fellas. So maybe I'll fucking sit down and talk about that movie. Because it's Evil Dead, and Evil Dead rocks. And, I mean, I will let you... I mean, it's a good movie. Yeah. I don't think Evil Dead has had a single bad movie yet. I like all the movies that they have. So, that's pretty cool. Alright. Thanks for watching, listening. Go check out the gaming channel. I'm not sure what will be coming out there. I'm still in the middle of playing through Sleeping Dogs. Me and Maverick just started playing Dead Island 2. So I'm sure a video with that will be coming at some point. It's a little hard because, Maverick's a fucking truck driver. So he has to stop at, like, truck stops to play. And we got to hope the internet's good and, all this shit. And, eventually we might finish The Forest. I don't know. Tyler he's gone AFK on me. He did a whole rearrange of his room. and he hasn't been around. So, and he was sick all last week. So, but Forest, hopefully we'll finish that sometime soon. So go check out over there. Come back next week when we talk about the Amityville Horror. I'm very excited to watch it. I have never seen it. And I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.